if the Lord tarries and I end up having grandkids one day, they're going to be in trouble. The reason why I say that is I love telling stories, and sometimes I'm like, man, the kids are going to be, oh no, Grandpa's here, run, he has another story. Well, I do. So I'm going to start this morning. With the story. Um, the story starts in March 1999, and in March 1999, I was in the right place at the right time, and I'm going to call it a divine appointment, because in March 1999, I met a gorgeous young lady named Betty. Oh, she's not here. I can't embarrass her, but yeah, we met in March 1999, and we about 2 months later we formally started dating, and by the time we took this picture's in October 1999. Her parents had a beautiful property in Rhode Island, and this was in the backyard. I would end up proposing to this young lady about a month later, and she agreed to marry me 7 months after that. So we got married on June 30th, 2000. So I felt we knew each other well. We went ahead, and got married. But as many married couples know, right? You continue to get to know each other, right? And you get to learn new things. And especially at the beginning of your marriage, you start learning, oh, I didn't know that about him, or I didn't know that about her. Well, one of the things I learned about Betty is that I needed to be careful with the kind of jokes I would make. I like making jokes. So this was about a year and a half after we had been married, and it's 2 months. It's 2 months after 9/11. So it's now about November 2001. I remember one morning before we were both heading out to school, I was just checking my email, and at the time, we were living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And at the time, U.S. Airways was the main airline carrier there, and they would always send out these specials to different places. And then one morning, I told Betty, wow, look, there's this special to go from Pittsburgh to Paris nonstop for $300 round trip. Yeah, I was like, and when I showed Betty that, I'm like, man, these people are desperate. No one, these planes must be empty. No one must be traveling. I looked at it, I'm like, wow, this is literally Pittsburgh, Charles de Gaulle, nonstop. I'm like, man, poor airline. So I go to work, I go to school, then Betty goes to school too, and then I get back home that day, and Betty has a spreadsheet laid out and tells me, we can do this. I'm like, what? She shows me the numbers, and she's, the flight's in there, right? $300 me, $300 her, and she tells me, hey, look, there's this brand new hotel that they're opening up in this one neighborhood in Paris, and because they're brand new, they're offering the rooms at about a quarter of the price. So I'm like, oh, okay, and I'm looking through the numbers, and I'm looking for a reason to be like you're crazy, we're students, we're on a shoestring budget, we can't do this, and I'm like, oh my, these numbers are adding up, and I'm looking through the spreadsheet, and she shows me my new schedule. At that time, I was in medical school, and I was doing a rotation in an emergency room where I made my own schedule, and I just had to fill a certain number of hours each week. So I noticed, the schedule is now front loaded and back loaded, and now there's 5 days open in the middle of the month. And she's like, and those are the days we can go. So I'm like, oh, okay. So 10 days later, we're on the streets of Paris, and that's Betty and I think in that building in the back. I think it's where Napoleon is buried, and it was 5 days shoestring budget, but man, we made it work. Trust me, we found out all the free stuff you can do in Paris. So it was an amazing trip. So we're going to fast forward 21 years later, and I have a question for you. Do you think I learned my lesson to be careful making jokes with my wife? You can. Okay, good. I'm Okay, I'm getting a lot of no's. Yeah, I'm not offended. Okay, I'm not offended. Okay, I'm getting a lot of like, no. No, I did not learn my lesson. So, but I'm learning, right? There's hope for me. So, so 21 years later, we're here in Chilium and we're heading home and we're rushing to get to the ferry and we just missed the ferry. Has that ever happened to you? Like you get there just, yeah, like, I still get that sinking feeling where I pull up and I'm like, it just, it just left right there. It's like, there's the ferry. So, so when I'm disappointed, many times I turn to humor. So what did I do? I made a joke, right? I told Betty, like, man, if I was an important member of the Colville tribe, then maybe I can make the ferry come back. Those watching online, this is no offense to our friends in the tribe. I'm not insinuating that like, there's things you can do to make the ferry come back, but no, just playing around. Hey, maybe if I was like a chief or like a prince or somebody, I could be like like teet, 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 teet. Oh look, the ferry's coming back. So I made that joke, and when you miss the ferry, right, you got to wait a half an hour, right? Well, by the time the half hour was up, Betty had already ordered a genetic family tree kit to come to our house, so I could find out if I really am a member of the Colville tribe. I mean, it's my wife, right? That's my wife. She didn't know my sermon. I don't know why she's not here. I'd be embarrassing her, but so here we go. So this is the report that I get back from the from the DNA Ancestry Service. To be honest with you, like there wasn't anything surprising on there. I mean, as far as my background, my parents are from the Dominican Republic, and the breakdown is just a history of the Dominican Republic. For those to revisit European and Caribbean history, the Dominican Republic was originally settled by by Native Americans, and then the Europeans came, and then after that the African slaves came. So not surprisingly, I'm 53% sub-Saharan African, 32% European, and that breakdown is surprise, surprise, Spain and Portugal. And I'm 6.6% Native American, but it's Arawak and Taino, and there's no Colville, there's no Nez Perce, nothing on that list that's by the hey, welcome to Colville. Like nope, there's 12 tribes. No, none of them on there. So really no mate. Well, I get tiny surprises. I mean, I found out I'm 1.1% North Indian Pakistani. I didn't know how that happened, and I'm 0.8% Ashkenazi Jew. Right? And wow, so those are small surprises, but the major ones, no surprises. So in short, the ferry's not coming back for me. Okay. So through the through the service, you can form a family tree, and you can see like all your other family members, and it breaks it out for you. And when I went ahead and did the whole family tree part, I saw cousins and distant relatives, and I noticed something strange, is that I saw all these relatives on my dad's side of the family, but I didn't see any relatives on my mom's side of the family. So, that got me thinking to something that was kind of just lingering for most of my life. This is like on a napkin, but I'm gonna, short version of my mom's side of the family tree, since the DNA service couldn't generate it for me. So I went ahead and put it up. If you start at the very top, you've got my great grandmother, Valentina Canario, and her husband Manuel Ramirez. They had 4 kids. They had 3 daughters and 1 son. The daughter I'm highlighting is my grandmother, Aurora. She also goes by Nubia. And then, she has her eldest daughter, my mom, Rafaela, and then my dad, Maximo, and then under that, I highlighted myself in 2 lines. That's Oswald, that's me. So my grandmother had 3 husbands. And by the time I was born, she was on husband number 3. And I always thought she just had really bad luck with men because, the first man, which is my mom's dad, he died. And then, her second husband, like, he ended up dying. So I just always thought, oh man, poor grandma, these men just die, right? But, but growing up, I noticed the following. That I can remember, I always called my grandmother's third husband, I always called him abuelito, like that was my grandfather. But I knew he wasn't my mom's dad. And interestingly, I was really close to my mom's side of the family. Like pretty much this is the family I grew up with, like all my uncles, aunts, and cousins. And just in regular family conversations, they would bring up my grandmother's second husband. They would mention him, oh yeah, remember this, remember that. You hear all these family stories. But when it came to stories about my mom's dad, there were none. No one would ever talk about who my grandmother's first husband was. And as a little kid, sometimes I would ask my mom, like, hey, what happened to your dad? And she would she would just get evasive. She would get evasive, or she would just change the subject. So, now I'm a grown man, for 40 plus years old. And so I decided, hey, you know what? About 3 or 4 people in the early part of this, this family tree have already passed away. So I just decided, look, you know what? Let me find out the truth. And my mom's not telling me the truth, so let's go to the source. The person who must know what happened to my mom's dad has to be my grandmother. So my grandmother lives in New York City. So I decided, all right, hey, I'm off to find the truth. So I'm headed to New York City. So I grew up in New York City, and this is the apartment complex I grew up in. One of the kids this morning in the children's story mentioned the home being a box. No, this is a box, my friend. They call them apartments in New York City. Like this is the box, 500, 600 square feet. So yeah, I literally, if I can put them there, right there. That's the third. There's like 3. There's 5 towers. I was in the 3rd tower on the 25th floor. So that was home. Growing up, that was home. And honestly, a lot of people are like, oh, New York City. Kids, you may hear stories about like New York City and how wonderful it is, and I'm like, most of those stories aren't true. Like, honestly, if I would gladly trade growing up here in Inchelium than growing up there. And so, but I bought my ticket out there, and wasn't terribly excited to be there, but I needed to find out the truth. So, all right, this is Lower Manhattan. My grandmother lives. She lives like somewhere close to the Williamsburg Bridge, around there. So I went. I literally fly into Newark, rent a car, head to my abuelita's house. So on the drive, I'm just kind of thinking what's the best way for me to ask these questions? Because for many years, I really was thinking well, maybe something shameful happened that nobody wants to talk about. I don't know, was my mom born out of wedlock or what? What was it? So, but anyway, so I'm praying that God give me the right words. So I get to my grandmother's house. She lives with my aunt. They live together and with some of my aunt's kids. And then I remember telling my grandmother, hey, you know what? I'm going to ask you a question, and I really want you to be honest with me. It doesn't matter what the answer is. I don't care what the answer is. I love you, and I just want to know, who's my mom's dad. So then she starts to say, almost like nonchalant, oh yeah, I remember when, when he passed away, this many X years ago, and then all of a sudden I'm like, hold on, you're not making sense to me. And then my aunt just flat out says, you don't know your mother's adopted? And I'm like, no. And so at that point, my grandmother thought that I knew. And then she realizes that, without nonverbal communication, she realizes no, I didn't know. And she starts crying. Like she starts crying, and I start crying. And then she tells me like, no, I met your, I met your mother when I was pregnant with my first pregnancy with, I thought, not my mom, it's my uncle, who I thought was number two, but no, he's number one. She says, yeah, when I was first pregnant, my mother-in-law brought this little girl to me just to help me raise, now that I'm gonna have a family, to help raise my son. So she went in and told me my mom came from this really dirt poor family. This is Dominican Republic. In the U.S., when people are poor, there's always welfare, right? There's always some kind of like safety net. In third world countries, like there is no, if you're gonna starve, you're probably gonna die. So something that was common then in very, very, very poor families is if they couldn't take care of their kids, they would basically like lend their kids out or basically like give their kids away. So my mom was given to my grandmother when she was 8 years old to be a servant, to be a servant, and in exchange for getting a roof and food and clothing, then she would serve. So while she's telling me this story, it's almost like I'm not believing what's happening, and all of a sudden I'm like this is all a lie. Like all these people, like this. Not that it would have been good to hear from my dad's side of the family, but like this is the side of the family I was close to, like, and no one, and no one told me. So is a house a home? Is it? Okay, I heard maybe, I heard no. I'm gonna say in and of itself, no. Like a house is not a home. Like you need a family to make a home. And my childhood home life revolved around my mother's side of the family, and now in an instant it was all gone. I felt like this is all a lie. This was all a lie. So that's what I was feeling. Was it right for me to feel this way? You can be honest. You told me I haven't done a good job at remembering that my wife, don't make jokes with Betty. So is it right for me to feel that this is all a lie? All right. Oh, you really love me. Okay. Thank you. When I really, looking back, once when the emotions went, kind of subsided, I mean, okay, yeah, maybe I could feel this way, but I also felt like, well, maybe I don't have the right to feel this way because they all love me. They all love me, and in being completely honest, they never let on that I was different from the rest of my cousins. Like my grandmother was there at my elementary school graduation. She was at all these big events. Like they were there. Like there was nothing that I would have suspected that like I'm different than the rest of everyone else. So when the evening was over, my grandmother cried some more, and then I assured her, hey, nothing's changed. At the end of the day, you're my, you're still going to be my grandmother, and I'm still going to be your oldest grandchild. So I leave the apartment, and I'm heading back to my rental car in New York City, and I'm kind of still crying, and I get Betty on the phone and let her know what happened. I'm going to segue of things you learn about your spouse. One of the things that I knew up to that point is that Betty reads people well, and she didn't say I told you so, but effectively, from the time I met Betty, within a year of us knowing each other, her meeting my mom and meeting my grandmother, she was like something strange, like something's off with these people. And so effectively, Betty was it makes it makes sense. Betty sensed. I'm not gonna extend this sermon another hour, but there's other stuff in our family that Betty she had it, she on point. So what next? So Oh, by the way, I put this picture up. Like this is the only house we've ever owned. This was our house back in Florida, and we literally had just put a brand new roof on the house. That was a traumatic experience. That's why I took a picture of the house. I'm like, oh look, we got a brand new roof on. But yeah, that was that's tiny Amadis and Amedeo in that picture. So as far as what comes next, and in any moment of crisis, of hurt or pain or betrayal, it's always best to turn to the Lord. And I turn to the Bible. I'm trying to unpack. All right, I turn to the Bible. There is nothing in this life that Jesus himself hasn't already gone through when he was here. There are many. Sometimes we believe the lies of the enemy to think that we're alone, that no one understands us, that no one can know what we're going through. But that's a lie. Jesus knows. He knows what it's like to be betrayed, right? He knows what it's like to be lied to. In Hebrews 4:15, for we have not an high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. And I was in a time of need. So I'm looking through my Bible, and then I decide, all right, so what does Jesus say about family? The beauty of technology today is you can type in any word, right? You can type in. So I'm like, okay, what's a family word? Daughter, right? So I put in the gospel, and hey, we have the familiar story, right? Jesus healing the woman, the woman who was suffering from bleeding. It says, we know the story. Hey, Jesus is in this massive amount of people, and he's going to go heal a girl that was sick, and this woman just touches him, and he feels power leave him, and she's healed. And when he addresses her, he says, daughter, and I emphasize that on purpose, be of good comfort. Thy faith hath made thee whole, and the woman was made whole from that hour. Did Jesus know her name? I'm getting yes. Yeah, right? If he knows the hair on our heads, I'm sure he knew her name. He could have been Linda, be of good comfort. And even then, wouldn't she have been surprised? You know my name, right? But he chose not to call her, I don't know, Linda, Beth. He chose to call her daughter because he loves her and Jesus loves us. So my Bible app, I type in, okay, hey, let me type in son, right? So that led me to, hey, when Jesus cured the paralytic who came to the ceiling. And the words he used, right, were, son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven. Have you ever ran into someone who you've met before, but you forgot their name? And you're going through a whole conversation. You're like, hey, you, and you're going through a conversation the whole time. You're like I don't know this person. I don't know this person's name. This literally happened to us at Costco yesterday. We ran into someone, and I forgot her name, but Betty knows her name. Betty knows. Hey, being honest, right? Betty knows her name. So when we run into Jesus, he never forgets our name, right? In the same way, you don't forget the names of your sons and your daughters. Jesus never forgets our names. So I continued my study, and I ran into a less familiar verse about families, which is Matthew 10:34-36. Think not that I come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at conflict against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's foes shall be they of his own household. So I'm like, okay, Lord, what gives? I've got warm and fuzzy, like, son and daughter. And now I've got like, man, break out your swords and let's, we're going to have a family meeting, right? So, the Bible has answers, so I'll look further. So I decided, hey, so what does Jesus literally say about family? So we're going to go into Jesus' literal earth family. We're in the time of, we're in the Christmas time of year that, right, don't we see a lot of these images, right? Mary, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, right? We have them, one side we're in the manger, and the other side, they're on their way to Egypt. And these are traditional images, but if we go by what's in the Bible, in these pictures, there should be at least 6 other kids in these pictures. In Mark 6:3, it tells us, is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and of Judah and Simon, and are not his sisters here with us? So in those pictures, I say minimum 6 because we've got 4 brothers, and it says sisters, so plural, so there's at least 2. So I don't know, there might have been 6, there might have been 8, there might have been 10 kids. Joseph had children prior to coming together with Mary. He was a widower. And sometimes people think, were these kids Mary's other kids? And we're like, well, no. Jesus was an only child. And we know that because at the time of Jesus' crucifixion, the reason why Jesus gave Mary to John is because the custom was the kids will take care of their mother, and the stepkids weren't obligated to take care of Mary. So that's why, by inference, Jesus was the youngest one in his family. So, to continue my search, what Jesus literally said about his family is the following. I love in my, how in your Bible how there's all these subheadings? And in my Bible, these verses, well, the ones in Matthew, the subheading is the true family of Jesus. And in there it says, while he yet talked to the people, behold, his mother and his brethren stood outside, desiring to speak with him. And one said unto him, behold, thy mother and thy brethren stand outside, desiring to speak with thee. But he answered and said unto them, who is my mother, and who are my brethren? And he stretched forth his hand toward his disciples and said, behold, my mother and my brethren. For whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven, the same is my brother and sister and mother. And the same stories in Luke, which, the story's in there more than once in the Bible, is there for a reason. It's at the end of Luke 8:21. And he answered and said unto them, my mother and my brethren are those which hear the word of God and do it. So what makes a house a home? It's family. And not just family, it's true family. True family are those who do God's will. How do we know? Hey, this family, your family is doing God's will. They're the ones that are putting God's word in action. They're doers of the word. Like the unit at YD, right? They're doers of the word. So, why this message is important to me? This message is important to me because, a couple of years ago I found out, wow, like a whole bunch of people that I thought were my genetic family weren't my family, and also I have a younger brother who hasn't spoken to me in 8 years, and wow, how any closer than that? But through it all, God has shown me that I'm not alone, and none of us are alone, and yeah, praise God. And in this holiday season, people's loneliness gets magnified even more. Like sometimes it's easy to miss because it's a festive time. It's a festive time, but for some people, like it's not the most wonderful time of the year. It's actually like the worst time of the year because families typically get together and they have no one to go to. As we go our separate ways this morning, as we wind things down, I invite everyone to always be doers of the word by sharing some Bible math with everyone. And that Bible math is this. In every home, there are a minimum of at least 2 people. Not 1, but 2. It's you and Jesus, and that's what truly makes a house a home. And because of Jesus' amazing love, He will lead you to others who are doing His will, and you will always have family. You will always have family in Him. And that family are your true brothers and your true sisters. It's not genetics, it's Jesus. And I live this out every time I come here to Inchilium. None of you here are genetically related to me. None of you showed up on my 23andMe. But you treat me better than some of my own family members do. And every Sabbath, I see my sisters, I see my brothers, I see my father, I see my mothers, and I'm reminded that it's not about genetics, it's about Jesus. So thank you for having us. Have a happy and blessed Sabbath.